The Curse of Minos. Long ago, in the great city of Athens, a king named Aegeus ruled with strength and wisdom, but his heart was weighed down by sorrow. Aegeus and his queen Aethra were childless. Desperate for an heir, the king consulted the oracle of Delphi. The oracle spoke cryptic words, hinting at the future that would soon unfold. Aegeus's heart ached for a son, but little did he know that his son's destiny would be tied to a curse that no one could escape. The birth of the Minotaur. Far from Athens, in the island kingdom of Crete, King Minos had received a gift from Poseidon, an enormous white bull, a symbol of divine favor. But Minos, filled with pride, decided to keep the bull instead of sacrificing it. Enraged, Poseidon cursed Minos' house. Queen Pasiphae, Minos' wife, was compelled to fall in love with the bull. From this unnatural union, the Minotaur was born, a creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull, a beast so fierce and terrifying that it would haunt the world for centuries. The Labyrinth, the curse's solution. Unable to control the beast, Minos ordered the creation of a labyrinth, a maze so intricate that no one could escape. Inside, the Minotaur was locked away, and every year, as a punishment for the killing of Minos' son, King Aegeus was forced to send 7 of his best men and 7 women to be sacrificed to the creature. The people of Athens lived in constant fear, knowing that their loved ones could be chosen as the next tribute. It was a vicious cycle with no end in sight, until a young hero decided to change everything. Theseus, the hero's calling. But there was one among the Athenians who could not stand by any longer. Theseus, the son of King Aegeus, was known throughout the land for his strength, wisdom, and valor. Though he was still young, Theseus had trained for this moment his entire life. When the next tribute was demanded, he volunteered to go to Crete. He promised his father that if he succeeded, he would return with white sails on the ship. But if he fell, the sails would remain black. His decision was made, not just for honor, but for the freedom of his people. Arrival in Crete. Meeting Ariadne. Theseus sailed across the Aegean Sea, his heart set on victory. Upon arriving in Crete, he was greeted by the cold silence of the island. Its people knew the fate that awaited the sacrificial youths. It was then that Theseus met Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos. She saw in him a bravery unlike any other. Despite her loyalty to her father, Ariadne couldn't stand by and watch a man so full of life walk into certain death. She offered him a gift, a ball of golden thread, with instructions to use it to find his way back after slaying the Minotaur. Entering the labyrinth. With the golden thread in hand, Theseus stood at the mouth of the labyrinth. The stone walls towered above him, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to stretch into eternity. The entrance before him was a yawning void, the blackness beyond it deeper than the night sky, suffocating in its silence. It felt as though the labyrinth itself was waiting, watching him. And in the stillness, the air felt thick, almost suffocating, pressing down on his chest like a weight. For a long moment, Theseus hesitated, his breath shallow, his fingers tightening around the thread. A bead of sweat trickled down his brow, though the air was cold. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and resolve. This was it. There was no turning back now. He took his first step forward, and the sound of his footfall was deafening in the quiet, the sharp echo reverberating off the stone walls. Each step after that felt heavier, as though the labyrinth itself was drawing him in, swallowing him with every movement. The thread unwound from his hand, a thin golden line snaking behind him, but it was a fragile lifeline. He could not rely on it to protect him. The maze seemed endless, twisting corridors that led to more twists, narrowing passageways that pressed in on him from all sides. It was like walking inside a living thing, a labyrinth that breathed, that
pulsed with a life of its own. Every turn, every shadow seemed to hold some unseen menace. And then, just as Theseus thought he might lose himself to the depths of the maze, he heard it. A low growl. It was deep and guttural, reverberating through the walls, rattling his bones with its primal power. It was the sound of a creature that had no business existing, a beast born of the god's anger, locked away for eternity. The Minotaur. His heart skipped a beat. Theseus's breath caught in his throat as the growl rumbled again, closer this time. A warning, a challenge. The Minotaur was near. His eyes darted from shadow to shadow, every flicker in the darkness a potential danger. His hand trembled slightly, but he forced himself to grip the thread harder. It was his only hope, his only guide in this nightmarish maze. Every step now felt as though it could be his last. The growl came again, louder, closer, more desperate. An animal sensing its prey. The labyrinth, alive with danger, seemed to close in around him. The air grew heavier, colder, and Theseus's chest tightened. Every instinct told him to turn back, to flee from the inevitable confrontation. But he couldn't. He was the hero, the one who had come to end this curse. He could not, would not, fail. The growl echoed again, and with it, the sound of heavy, thudding footsteps. Too heavy to be human, too rhythmic to be anything else but the Minotaur's own pounding hooves. Theseus swallowed hard, feeling the cold sweat on his skin. He had come this far. There was no turning back now. His heart raced, his breath quickened, but he pressed on, the golden thread unwinding faster in his hand, guiding him deeper into the heart of the labyrinth. The walls of stone closed in tighter, and with every step, the shadows seemed to press in, the labyrinth itself whispering to him, "It is here. It is waiting. You cannot escape."
The Minotaur appeared, its massive form emerging from the shadows, filling the narrow passageway, a creature born of myth, part man, part bull. Its eyes blazed with a primal fury. The beast's horns, sharp and gleaming, gleamed with malice. Its fur was matted with dirt and sweat, its muscular body rippling with raw power. The labyrinth itself seemed to hold its breath, as though the walls were aware of the terror about to unfold. The creature bellowed. Its roar was deafening, a sound that rattled the very stones beneath Theseus's feet. It was a force of nature, and it moved with incredible speed and purpose, charging at Theseus with a lethal intent. Theseus barely had time to react. His heart pounded as he instinctively sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the first deadly swing of the Minotaur's horns, which sliced through the air with terrifying precision. The force of the attack was enough to shake the ground, and Theseus could feel the rumble in his chest, like the earth itself was reacting to the beast's fury. The battle had begun. The Minotaur was relentless. It swung its heavy fists, each strike coming down with the power of a thunderclap, sending shockwaves through the narrow halls of the labyrinth. Theseus raised his sword just in time, deflecting one mighty blow, but the impact sent his arm trembling with the force. He could feel his strength beginning to wane, but he couldn't stop now. He fought with everything he had. He dodged another powerful charge from the Minotaur, its horns raking across the stone walls with a screeching sound. Theseus moved with speed, his sword flashing as he aimed for any opening in the creature's defenses. He struck, the sword biting into the thick hide of the beast, but the blow seemed to barely faze it. The labyrinth closed in around him, the shadows growing darker as he pressed forward. Every turn seemed like a trap. The Minotaur pressed on, its eyes glowing with unrelenting rage. Theseus's breath was shallow, his muscles aching with fatigue, but he knew he had to press on. The monster's roar filled the space again, a warning of what would come if he faltered. Then, the Minotaur lunged, its huge form a blur of motion. Theseus had to move quickly, his feet slipping slightly on the slick stone floor. The beast's enormous fist came down with brutal force, but Theseus rolled out of the way just in time. As he did, he felt a glimmer of hope. The Minotaur had momentarily overextended itself. In that moment, Theseus took his chance. He lunged forward, sword raised, and drove the blade into the Minotaur's side.
The impact was deep. He could feel the force of the strike as the blade cut through muscle, slicing toward the creature's heart. The Minotaur staggered back, howling in pain, its enormous body shifting with a jarring sound. For a moment, there was a fleeting second of quiet, broken only by the creature's labored breathing. But the fight wasn't over. The beast roared in fury, its strength seemingly renewed, its body thrashing in a desperate attempt to break free. It swung wildly, trying to slam Theseus into the walls, its hooves pounding against the stone. But Theseus was focused, his sword still in hand, his resolve ironclad. With one final cry, he stepped in, pushed himself forward with everything left in him, and thrust his blade upward. The sword sank deep into the Minotaur's heart. For a long moment, the beast seemed frozen in time, its eyes wide with disbelief, its massive body trembling, and then, with a final shuddering breath, it collapsed to the ground with a tremendous crash, shaking the walls around them. The labyrinth seemed to exhale as the creature's massive form crumpled at his feet, its once deafening roars reduced to nothing more than a soft whimper. The silence that followed was suffocating.
The return. The tragic mistake. With the Minotaur dead, Theseus retraced his steps through the labyrinth, the golden thread guiding him back to the entrance. The light at the end of the tunnel beckoned him, and with each step, he could feel the weight of victory. But in his triumph, Theseus made a fateful mistake. He forgot to change the sails on his ship from black to white. His father, King Aegeus, waiting on the cliffs for his son's return, saw the black sails approaching and believed his son had perished. Grief-stricken, he threw himself into the sea, and the waters were forever named the Aegean Sea in his memory. Though Theseus lost his father, his name would live on forever in the hearts of the Athenians. The labyrinth was destroyed, and the Minotaur, the terrible creature that had terrorized the land for so long, was no more. Theseus had changed the fate of his people, and his name would be remembered for generations. His courage, his sacrifice, and his legacy would inspire heroes for centuries to come. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the heart of Greek mythology. The legend of Theseus and the Minotaur reminds us all that heroes are born not just from strength, but from the choices they make and the sacrifices they are willing to endure. Until next time, keep your curiosity alive and your imagination endless.